Hey there, everybody. It is Irene Lyon, and welcome to this live stream today it's July 9th, 2020. I'm going to be getting into some topics today that are a little different, specifically around the importance of exercise, muscular strength, muscle mass, keeping our independence, something called usual versus successful aging. I'm going to bring in some elements around how unhealed trauma impacts our inability to be vigorous with our activity. I'm also going to talk about some of the research that I did back in my mid-20s, back in 2000, 2001, 2002, and then in 2008, all around really investigating and trying to get an understanding of why we really need to keep our capacity on aerobic and muscular. So this is on Facebook, obviously, but you might be watching this on YouTube afterwards. So this is a live stream. I've got comments coming in here, so I'm going to be interactive with the comments, but I'm also going to teach. I have notes here. I've also got my thesis here, this book. I'm going to read just a little bit from it, not a lot, but a little bit to just give you some of these topics. And so as I get into this, I'm just going to make sure all systems are going well. So I'm going to see who's here, move my screens a little bit. Hello, Miyoki from Holland. Hello, Cheryl from the UK. Hey there, Patty. Good to see your name pop up. You are so welcome. So looks like we're all doing good and everything's coming in clear. So I'm going to just start with a few things. So about a week or so ago, I posted a video that on my YouTube channel, you may have seen it, however, on Instagram or Facebook, that was titled something along the lines of how excitement can turn into fear. Who saw that? Did anybody see that? And what I talked about in that video, I kind of had three different pieces, but one was one of the reasons why we think, and there were some things to back this up, and I'm going to read some of the comments from that video. One of the reasons why people stay away from and do not enjoy intense physical activity, other than the fact that they're maybe not used to it, and of course when we start more intense activity, you know, we feel out of breath, we might feel some burning in our muscles because of the byproducts created through metabolism, lactic acid, it burns, you know, it's not maybe what we're used to. So there's like these normal things that anyone experiences when they start to learn how to exercise more vigorously. And then there's this situation where someone will start to exercise. And I'll use an example. A friend of mine who has a trauma history, very high ACE score, adverse childhood experiences study score, ACE score. If you don't know what that is, I did a video, SoundCloud episode on this long time ago. I'm not going to go into the history of what the ACE study is, but this person that I knew had a very high ACE score, which means a lot of early adversity. And then, of course, later in life, they were suffering from autoimmune conditions, chronic kind of, we would say just a chronic illness kind of physiology, depression, etc. And when they started to exercise intensely, they would go into a panic attack, deep, deep anxiety. And once they started to understand what their stress physiology was, how it was mimicking this high heart rate of going up, you know, a steep climb or a step of steps, you know, steep steps, or exercising, say, on a piece of equipment at the gym, they started to realize that this spike in their heart rate, huffing and puffing, you know, because that's what you do when you start to increase your activity and intensity, it resembled a trauma response. It resembled the fear response. It resembled this sense of all of the blood in the body going to the extremities, the big, thick leg muscles, the spinal muscles, the arm muscles, to essentially go into that fight or flee situation. And so if someone doesn't have the history of understanding that this is what that is, a person could very well feel this panic attack this anxiety, this raise in heart rate, and then attach fear to it and think to themselves, I'm never doing that again. I'm only ever going to do low-level activity. I'm going to stick to gentle stretching, gentle movements, and there's nothing wrong with gentle movement, like easy yoga, easy tai chi, going for a soft, easy walk, going on a bike ride that's on flat and enjoying the scenery. There is nothing wrong with that. If anything, I encourage it. This is what we would call physical activity. I'll get into that in a moment. But as human beings, we need to up our ante with our intensity. I read ages ago that hunter-gatherers back in the day, they would walk up to 25 kilometers a day. I don't know what that is in miles, it's a little less, but they would walk up to 25 miles or kilometers a day. That's a lot of walking, that's a lot of foraging, that's a lot of crouching and moving and being over terrain that is uneven. So we've got this physiology that's built for intense activity, long endurance aerobic activity, but then we take us as humans, like hunter-gatherers, that was, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, we plop them into this more domesticated, industrial, agricultural, industry, tech. I mean, here we are sitting at our desks or somewhere looking at a screen. We're not vigorous with our bodies in the way we used to be. So, because of this shift in our environment and what we do, we are not creating the kind of vigor, we're not tapping into all the different capacities aerobic. So I'll start defining some things. I'm going to weave and blend some things in. I'm going to go to some of my research, going to get to some tactical, but our aerobic capacity, like if I was to say, let's start doing some jumping jacks all together, or marching on the spot, or let's go for a long walk or a long bicycle or a long swim, or let's vacuum our house from top to bottom, that is going to require aerobic ability. We're going to use oxygen, going to come into the body, it's going to give juice to the muscles so that we can keep moving. We expel, of course, the waste products, and we do this, there's like this exchange, this balance, this harmony between effort, energy coming in, energy going out, the blood starts going, it's really good for us, right? So there's this concept of aerobic activity, and that's one very important part of health. The other very important part of health, and FYI, today I'm not going to be speaking about nervous system dysregulation and mental health and soul health, spiritual health, connecting with the mind body. I'm going to make this very, very specific to the physical meat and potatoes of our muscles, our cardiovascular, our respiratory, our balance, our flexibility, all of that. So this is a very special topic today. So we need the aerobic. We also need muscular. So there's sort of these components of we will call fitness. Aerobic, muscular, flexibility, balance, we could say coordination is not as important because it kind of comes online, and I'll speak to this. So I'm going to get into a few pieces around that, but I'm just going to see your comments and see what's going on here in the comments. So hey Liesel, you said, oh, this makes me cry. So many therapists have told me to meditate, exercise when I wasn't ready. Yeah, that's very common. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to read some of the comments that I got from Instagram last week when I posted this video, or I think it was 2 weeks ago, around why when we have a high heart rate as a result of positive things like excitement, hearing good news, joy, happiness, exercise that we are voluntarily wanting to do, why this positive stress can tip us over into fear. And here were some of the comments. One person said, now I know why intense exercise gives me panic attacks. Yoga is great, walks excellent. Anything more? Horrifying, they wrote. So interesting, so thank you for explaining. So that kind of just explained what I was mentioning a second ago. Another person said, I've taught students, so grade 1, so real wee little people like age 6, who are obviously uncomfortable with their increased heart rate. This helps me understand why. Who here was in a situation in school where, and again, I'm all for physical education. I actually think we need more physical education in school, not less. But the way in which we brought physical education into the school system, it works for some kids, but it doesn't work for all kids, just like ways of learning and teaching where it's very book-based and very intellectual. For some kids, they're wired that way. Others, they need to move and dance and create to learn and get into their brain. So we're all a little different in that respect. And so if we think about school, here's another one. What an eye-opener. I worked in an elementary school and I saw our most, and she said in quotes, troubled children, so probably kiddos who have a high ACE score or maybe have earlier developmental trauma, just a whole, so something, maybe birth trauma. It doesn't have to be because the parents were being mean and terrible, but let's say birth trauma, in utero trauma, dental trauma, these things that throw our nervous system off kilter and into imbalance, right? So we have these troubled children fall apart during gym class. It always puzzled me because it should be a fun class. Exactly, right? Let me know if this is connecting with some of your experiences in gym class. For one, I was brought up active. I still am super active. If anything, I love just being active all day. Of course, I am not, but even though I was raised being active by my parents, canoeing, hiking, skating, going for walks with the dog every day, I hated gym class because it had this, it was about testing and seeing how good you were and timing and games. And to this day, I don't even like to play cards or board games. So again, here's one person who was very active, very athletically gifted in certain domains, but the way that they facilitated getting kids active at that young age, for many, it poisoned their experiences with their bodies and how their bodies can be this gift of goodness and intensity. So that's another comment I wanted to say. Another person mentioned 6 years ago I was sent to an exercise program as I have chronic fatigue. They asked me to walk up and down the room for 2 minutes. After 1 minute, I became very lightheaded and I noticed my pulse had dropped drastically. People all the time tell me to walk as if it will make me feel good, but it doesn't. It makes things worse. I find yoga better. So this is such an important, we could do a whole hour on just this. But someone who has, I said I would not talk about the nervous system, but I got to put a little bit in here. So someone who is living with chronic fatigue, dysregulation in the system, their system flips. Not always, but for many people who have what we would call POTS, low blood pressure, people who faint easily, who go into dissociation easily. The system is essentially not wanting to feel intensity. So when it starts to feel the heart rate go up, there's like this unconscious wiring that says, no, don't do that, danger, danger. We're going to drop your blood pressure. We're going to drop your heart rate. We're going to drop your breath rate, because anything that resembles high intensity means something bad is really going to happen and I better shut down and hide. I hope that makes sense. So the thing here with this individual and anyone who fits this category is, yes, yoga is great. And when we limit our intensity over time, we will lose our functionality, our independence, our power, and our ability to take care of ourselves and have good health. I'm going to read some of my thesis in a second. And then here's another one. Weightlifting for me, I just couldn't enjoy. Deep down, something deep down frightens me. So again, if we think about weightlifting, we have to engage all of our body, at least I hope we do. We're focused, we're gathering all this muscle, but the muscle fibers in our body to act, and it's as if it's an explosion of power. We need healthy life force energy to do that. Again, if we were raised in a situation where, let's just say, power and life force energy was negative and toxic and like rage, like really harmful aggression, that's going to be terrifying. Or let's just say we never saw it And so this idea of being a strong human with really, like boundaries and here I am, that can also be terrifying. Let's see, what else do we have here? Someone else said, I always hated gym at school and sports. After 60 years, I arrived at about this conclusion. So again, we have these experiences when we're young, and it just sets this tone for us never considering that maybe there's a way to change that and rewire it. Let me just see if there's one more thing I want to share here. One person said, I had no idea this connection between the fear response and activity and it making people want to stop, but explains why I have massive traumatic response to trying exercise. Is there a way to help this? Keep reminding ourselves during exercise that we are safe. So there is a way to help this, and I'll talk about this, and I've talked about this in other videos. I did one earlier this year on exercise and healing trauma, so we'll pop that into the comments. If you're on Facebook, we'll put it into the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the Show More section. So I wanted to read those comments again from Instagram. If you're just joining me, hey, it's Irene. I'm doing a special topic today on activity and muscle strength and why it's so important. So this was from a video I did a few weeks ago on why it's so important for us to, or why I should say people go into panic and fear responses when they're active. So I'm going to go back to the comments and I'm going to do some reading, and we'll get into some more sciencey stuff. Okay. Hey David, you say weightlifting and rage, anger, activation, is this a thing? Because it is with me. I think I might have just answered that. So yeah, and the thing is again, it's like, how can we, part of having a stored traumatic stress response in the body is everything can get coupled together, where we feel excitement and it instantly turns to fear, or we feel ourselves being really strong and it instantly goes to a rage response that is not positive. And so we have to be able to tease apart and differentiate. This is a really important word right now, differentiate different things so everything isn't just clumped into one. Hey Irina, I experienced that Qigong can be calm and train quite good. What is your experience? Qigong is a beautiful practice. One of my good friends and co-teachers, Ilya Marak, he's taught me so much lovely Qigong. But again, this is not intense physical exercise, so we're going to focus on that today. I'm going to read one more comment, and then I'm going to get into some things here. I have just been pushing myself, this is Katerina, through exercise and falling apart for years. Yesterday, after watching one of your videos on YouTube, I went for my first trauma-sensitive run. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. It was more of a meander and was much better. I had some real moments of responding to my physiology. Thank you, you're welcome. That's so good. And this is really important what Katerina wrote, is that we have been taught, like the media screws us up with body image and what we should look like and what our perfect, house should look like, and our partners and our diet. It does the same with activity, right? True story, don't tell anyone this, but I'm telling you, when I heard that the Olympics had to be canceled this year, I was actually kind of happy, because a lot of these big media-driven sporting events are so harmful for those who struggle with being active, because we kind of bow to these gods of amazing physical feat and prowess, and then we go and we try to swim a lap and we practically drown in the pool because we don't have the capacity to do it. And so there's this mismatch with what we see, with these athletes who have basically been trained like soldiers to be so physically fit, and we can't connect to that. And so what you just said here, Katerina, is so important, because this idea of titration, being trauma sensitive, going on a trauma sensitive run, so good. So it's not about how many hours or how many miles, but how can I play with my intensity, feel my heart rate go up, be vigorous with my breath, but know when I have to pause and walk. There's nothing wrong with a run walk, right? If we're only used to walking and we do a run walk where all we do is run for 15 seconds or do a quick pace, that is still a positive stimulus to the entire system. Okay, I lied. I'm going to go to a few more comments here. So Marie-Pierre said, competitive sports are not for all kids. Exactly. Dodgeball, for instance, might be scary for kids with unbalanced nervous systems who are already dealing with survival energy. 100%. Again, everyone's different. Everyone's super different. Hey Rachel, you said I was active when I was young playing soccer, but did not like gym class, so much performance. Ugh, that's why I stopped playing soccer. The pressure and criticism of parents took the joy out of movement. Oh man, don't even get into that about parents. I mean, this again is how this unresolved trauma and our own insecurities from our childhood can get pushed onto kiddos. And I'll be honest, some of the more sick and chronically ill people I've worked with, the trauma that they're healing from is from competitive sport, from being put through this ringer of falling and having to get up right away without even feeling the pain. The level of functional freeze in so many of these athletes is massive. And often as they get older, they end up with debilitating chronic pain syndromes, depression, anxiety, because all of those instances where they hurt themselves, got injured, didn't feel like going to the gym that day or to training, but they had to go, it overrides the natural impulse in the body. So it's a tough one. So I'm going to transfer over to some definitions. And this is going to be more story time for a moment. So bear with me here. It's a good story. So my background is in exercise science. Before I got into really learning about trauma and the healing of it from the somatic level and working with the nervous system, which really started in 2004. From 1993 to 2002, do the math, I'm not sure how long that is, that part of my world was all about exercise science, rehab, fitness, studying the human body, studying performance, nutrition, etc. And one of my projects is I did my master's degree in biomed and health science. And this was down in Australia at the University of Wollongong, for those of you who know that area. And I was handed a research study that I actually didn't want originally. I was trying to go down to study more about cellular physiology, working with omega-3s and the cell, and then I realized that that wasn't going to pan out. And there happened to be a grant that was just given to the department to study the effects of, and get this, red meat, so red meat, protein, animal protein, the effects of red meat on muscle, structure, function, performance in older adults. It's a mouthful. And so the reason why was because people were still trying to recover from the cholesterol scare of red meat. And so the meat industry of Australia was funding this study. So of course, studies are driven by funds that come from interested parties, usually. And so I was given this. They knew that I had a background in exercise science, and what we needed to do, what I was given the job of, was to develop an intervention study where we took groups of old adults, so older adults was like the PC name, 65 to 85, and we put them through a 12-week high intensity resistance, so strength training protocol to see how their muscle function, their muscle mass, their aerobic capacity, their balance, their ability to, just stay upright, their ability to sit to stand. We put them through this high intensity weight training regimen for 12 weeks, and we had two groups. One group had a regular protein diet and one group had a high protein diet. Now, if you want to read my entire thesis, I don't recommend it because it's a lot of techie jargon, but you can still check it out. You can actually find that on my site under, I think it's Meet Irene, at the very bottom under my credentials. The PDF to this thesis is there. It is 177 pages long, so again, not easy reading, but you can check it out. It is all there. The references are comprehensive. So I did this study, and I started to do the research, because you have to do a lit review before. And what I found out was that there was one researcher who actually ended up in Australia. Her name is Maria Fiatarone. She's Italian. Fiatarone Singh, she was married. She really put on the map how old, frail, renal failure, depression, chronic congestive heart failure. She studied all these populations of very frail older adults, some in their 90s, late 90s, and they put them through intense resistance training of the legs. So if you've never been into a gym, this might not make sense, but I'll explain it. When you go to a gym, there's often these machines where you sit and you push with your feet. It's called a leg press. So she tested the leg press and the leg extension with these real old, frail, unwell individuals. And these are people that were like on dialysis, they had congestive heart failure, like really, really, frail older adult humans. And what she found was that by stimulating their muscle mass in the legs, specifically the legs, all of the markers of health improved. Their balance, their aerobic capacity, their muscle mass, their muscle strength, their ability to walk faster. People that were in wheelchairs started to go into walkers. People with walkers just needed canes, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point. And so what she realized and what she started to piece together was that the frailer we are, the more important it is to actually push and activate the system with high intensity. Now, we don't want to wait until we're 95 years old on dialysis to start a strength training regime. And again, we have kind of glamorized and terrified people around going into the gym because of, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, the guys, the big muscles, that whole bodybuilding world. But I think now, and I know, there's a lot of recreation centers, a lot of community centers, there's a lot of gyms, there's even women-only gyms, all these different kinds of places where a person can go, doesn't matter who they are, and they can get some help and they can learn how to do some of these basic exercises. So she did these studies. I then took her research, got into the research more, and this is what we did with my people. And we did this with 40 people over 12 weeks. And it was probably one of the funnest things I've ever done because we met twice a week and we only did legs and we only did leg press. That's all we did. And we wanted to keep it really simple to see if by just doing one exercise, and it was only twice a week, and it was only 8 repetitions 3 times. In the end, I think I counted the time. It ended up being like a minute of activity, even though they would come and we would stretch and we would warm up. The actual dose, the actual medicine of pushing that weight was only about a minute long each time they came in. Now, of course, we had to teach them how, right? So you don't just put someone into an exercise machine and say, okay, go at 80% your max. You got to do it in a titrated way. Here's where that word titration comes in. You've got to warm up the ligaments, warm up the muscles. You have to we spent about 2 weeks getting their motor and nervous system pathways, understanding how to push this weight. And what's fascinating is that humans are pretty damn smart. And so when you teach them in a good way and they're interested and they want to do it, it comes pretty quickly. And what happens is the strength increase at the beginning of a weight training regimen is very high. It goes up really quickly, like exponential. It's not because the muscle mass is getting big. It's because the nervous system pathways are starting to fire and they like it. So if you were here at the beginning of my talk, hello to the 81 people here, I talked about how back in the day, hunter-gatherers, we walked maybe 25 kilometers a day. We were crouching, doing things. We were, much more active than we are now. Lifting things, carrying things. I mean, right now, we very rarely have to physically use our body unless we purposely do it. And so we don't have that anymore. And one of the things often people say is, oh, Irene, I don't want to go into the gym. It's just so unnatural. It's not in nature. And I say, yes. And we're not being put in situations where we're having to exert ourselves at full maximum intensity. If you wanted to go outside and put your car in a parking lot and put it into neutral and push it, that would be a great way to do it, but that's not really safe, and I don't recommend that. You know, like there are ways to find strength in your own home, but typically the level of push and the level of weight we need to do, it's safest when done at a recreation or a gym center. So we did this with these folks. We studied them over the 12 weeks. We did aerobic capacity, strength, etc. at the beginning and the end. And basically, to wrap it up in a quick nutshell, the exercise was the most potent factor in this study. The different diets didn't make a difference. And of course, bear in mind, these individuals were already healthy. They were not suffering from heart disease or renal failure or depression or a disability. They were actually already very healthy older adults. But it showed that even with these active, healthy adults, adding in that stimulus increased their muscle mass. It increased their vigor. And one of the things that was so interesting, and anecdotal evidence doesn't really hold up in a court of law, I mean that kind of tongue-in-cheek, in a science arena, but what I heard from them just in talking that couldn't be measured, because we didn't look at this as a psychological study, now I wish we had, they were finding that by stimulating their bodies this way, their minds were getting sharper, their ability to do housework was way, way higher. They weren't fatiguing. I'm thinking of this one woman, Joyce, who was just so pleased that she could get all of her housework done in 1 hour as opposed to spreading it over a few days. And this wasn't because we were working on her aerobic capacity. We were only working on pushing weight heavy twice a week for 12 weeks. Now, the reason why we get an improvement in aerobic capacity when we push weight heavy, and of course safely, think about this. Just imagine this, if you will. You're sitting in this weight machine and you're learning how to push weight, and you have to engage yourself to push with your feet. I'm using my hands because you can see those, but you're pushing, and you're going all out for 8, 10 repetitions, and then you rest. The way that weight training works is you do a dose, a set as we would call it, and then you rest. And when you rest, the heart is beating, you're huffing and puffing, and that dose is like having aerobic activity. It primes the system. And so what the research has shown is that by actually lifting weights, if one had to choose between going to the gym and walking slowly on a treadmill for 30 minutes or lifting weights for, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, the weights actually in the end over time will have a better dose-response relationship, because not only is it improving the tendons, the ligaments, the bone, the muscle, it's also improving the aerobic capacity. Now, the other interesting thing, and I'm kind of going a little quickly here, is that one of the hallmarks, one of the signs, one of the ways to measure how we're going to end up later in life, and this is terrible stuff to say, but our mortality, morbidity, like how long we're going to live and our independence, is walking speed. Yes, that is true. How fast we can walk comfortably. And when we can walk fast, what's happening is we have the power in our quadriceps and hip muscles to propel us forward. We also have the confidence that we have the balance to go faster. And so, interestingly enough, again, by improving this one area of their body, their quadricep muscles, their glutes, and their hamstrings, because that's what you work when you do a leg press, their walking speed improved, their balance improved. So the importance of muscle mass, I cannot stress. I'm going to read a definition or two for you because it's fun to have some of these definitions. So there is this concept called usual versus successful aging. And this is kind of an older concept, but it's in my glossary again. If you want to download my thesis, you can. So usual aging occurs when factors of lifestyle or environment intensify the common age-related changes such as diminished muscle strength, muscle mass, increases in body fat, and lower levels of physical activity. So that's usual aging. We see this decline in muscle mass, strength, increase in body fat, and just an overall decrease in capacity. And I'm all about capacity, whether it's aerobic capacity, muscle capacity, nervous system capacity. However, so that was usual aging. Successful aging is maintaining and even enhancing functionality and quality of life into older ages through the maintenance of factors such as physical activity levels, muscular strength, and muscular mass. And I'm really stressing the muscle today because it has been one of those factors that is connected with loss of independence, inability to walk, inability to sit to stand, to get down to the floor, etc., etc. A fancy word, I'll define one. I think a lot of us have probably heard of the term osteoporosis or osteopenia. There's also a term that is called sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is basically the loss of muscle mass. Sarco means flesh, and then penia means loss. And there's this kind of common just assumption that as we age, we lose our muscle mass. And our hormonal system does change, but we can maintain it and we can keep it. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to define for you guys. Yes. So the other thing is the difference between physical activity and physical exercise. So here's like straight from the definitions in physical exercise science. So physical activity. So I'm going to define physical activity, physical exercise. Physical activity is any bodily movement that is either planned or non-planned that results in expenditure of energy. So washing the car, washing the floors, doing housework, cooking, walking to the store, anything that's just making you active, whether it's planned or not, that's physical activity. Whereas physical exercise is partaking in an activity with an intent to develop or maintain physical fitness and overall health, such as endurance or resistance training. Now, the other parts of maintaining good physical health, physical fitness, would be things like balance, flexibility. What I have found is that when we improve our strength and we improve our nervous system conduction pathways to engage all of our muscles at once and for an explosive pattern, our balance and our kinesthetic awareness just starts to pop in. Now, we also have to understand this is the kind of weight training where you're not looking at a TV, you might be listening to music, you're not thinking about what you got to do afterwards. You are very focused. You're feeling your breath, you're feeling your positioning, you're feeling your feet, and you're really focused on those muscles firing. And one of the things that makes me kind of sad when I do go to the gym and I see an older, not just old, but anyone on a machine, and they're just pumping away for like minutes at a time, and they're not focused on what they're doing. Again, one could say at least they're moving, at least they're there. Yes, that is true. But if that person was focused and had awareness and intention, the brain is going to turn on even more strength when we do that. Okay, I'm going to go to the comments. I'm going to get into a little bit more, but I wanted to sort of just define what exercise is versus physical activity. The research I did, I really shortened it. There's a lot more I could tell you. But, and I'm going to read one portion in a second. Usual versus successful aging, I wanted to define that. And here's another interesting thing. Like one of my professors that I had in my undergrad degree, Susan Crawford, she's out of Vancouver here, she said that we've seen again through this research that this other woman did in Australia and in the United States, that it's better for us to stand on a stool, and I remember her saying this, and jump off of it 5 times a day than go for a 30-minute walk. Because that catching, that muscular contraction to catch ourselves, it asks all of ourselves to be involved. We have to focus, we have to feel, we put force through the bones, which is very important. I say go for the 30-minute walk and do whatever that version is to increase the strength and the power. I think we need both, especially if we consider, again, what we are built for. And think about it this way. I know not everybody has a car, but if you do have a car, we know that the car isn't just the engine. or it's not just the body. There are parts in the engine, there's fluid, there's glass, there's tires, there's brakes, there might be the electronics. There's all these things that goes into a vehicle working properly, and you have to keep them up. You have to repair, you have to keep things lubed up, fluids topped, etc., etc. Our system, the human system, while it's definitely way more complex than an automobile, we have got all these different parts. So we have a heart, we have lungs, we have muscles, we have tendons, we have ligaments, we have our balance organs, we have this nervous system. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if we've been trained to feel intensity and that to be bad, we have to find ways through, of course, working with the nervous system, learning how to build capacity, so that we can be in this vigor and use all the parts of the body and not just one. And by one, I mean that gentle yoga routine or that gentle walking routine. Again, very important, just like, the transmission fluid is important in a car, but so is the engine that houses it, and so are the tires and the brakes. It's all important. Okay, gonna head into the comments here. Hey there, Dan. It takes me days to recover from a workout, sometimes breathing problems and sleeplessness. Yeah, so this is a common thing. Again, I'm going to go back to kind of my other hat, which is nervous system health and awareness and regulation, is we need to, again, if you know that you're someone who is shying away and the thought of doing anything intense is like death to you, that's a real thing, first of all. And then the second thing is we might need to build capacity first at the nervous system level, and of course that's what I am focused on more now, so that we can put more physical vigor and intensity into our bodies. The research is just too strong to say that it's not important. It is one of the more important things, is having vigorous activity in our bodies. Melanie says, any reason why yoga and meditation sends the body into overdrive? 100%. Melanie, check out an article I did a little while ago titled Why the Mindfulness Bubble is About to Burst. Into that, I get into the deep elements of why these more meditative mind-body practices can put us into overdrive. The nutshell, the small, explanation of that is, if we have got unresolved survival stress in our cells, in our organs, in our memories, and we go to do a more gentle practice that quiets things down, we might feel things that we're not ready for and we don't have the capacity for. And so this is why we can get sent into overdrive. This is one of the reasons why people also get addicted to exercise, right? I used to work in a ski town where, holy moly, like it was like cool to basically torture your body, be addicted to exercise, and just go. And that is also a coping strategy to avoid feeling the things that are internal in the system. So we're all very different humans, we are. Okay, just going through your comments, everyone. Hey Jennifer, you said since SBSM, so this is a 12-week program I run once a year, so this is one of my students. I've been titrating my way through activities. I love biking and swimming. This new approach is revolutionary. Same with healthy eating, 100%. Yeah, we really need to learn how to titrate our activity at the beginning, because we need to be able to get this intensity on board, but we also don't want to do it in a way that's going to be disastrous. Someone said, Michelle, hey, how can we replicate the leg press at home without equipment? There are a few things we can do. However, it depends on your knee health. So I am someone who has really bad knees due to previous surgeries. So for me, body weight is okay. Like I can do squats at home, for example, and that activates my legs, but it's not enough for my body weight and my fitness level to just do that. I need extra. We can start with using bands. You can get these TheraBands. Again, this is something where you're going to want to maybe, Michelle, hire an online trainer or someone to find some variety. But we can use bands to like put on our heels and we sit on the floor and we press out. The trouble with that is, again, you're only going to get maybe 5 or 10 pounds of pressure off of those bands because there's only so much tension they can give. That's kind of why I joked, like if you wanted to do this, you could find a car in a parking lot and like push it, because that's going to exert full body force, but that's also not the safest situation. So yeah, it's hard to do the leg press intensity without a piece of equipment, I will be very honest. But bear in mind, everyone, like when I was looking at the research, some of the studies showed that only doing 1 session a week was the same neurologically as doing 3 sessions a week. It all comes down to that focus and intention and stimulus. Miyoki says, where do balance exercises fit in? You know, that's a great question. And I used to teach balance exercises, whether it was on those discs or on balls. And what I learned as I got more into my Feldenkrais work and other forms of work is that there's nothing wrong with them. But if we already have a pattern in our body that isn't, I don't want to use the word aligned, but if we have an asymmetry in our spine, or if we have a hip that's a little less strong or is weaker, when we get into these balance equipment things, the unconscious brain will naturally compensate for the asymmetries. And what'll happen is, if we're not really in tune with our body awareness and our symmetry, we will train a pattern that is not good for us. And so the other work I do is something called Up and Down. It's a group workshop that I have been teaching for quite a few years, again with my partner and teaching colleague Elia Marak. Now, because of COVID this year, we have had to cancel all of our workshops. However, this concept that we teach is teaching people how to go from standing down to the floor, to sit, to lie, and then back up again, all fours, up to crouch. And we do it in many different ways. Side on the side, down, rolling, squatting, crouching. We blend so much in. And what we do when we are working with the body in that way is we're teaching the body how to find potent posture and balance dynamically. So we're working with the actual system as opposed to putting the system on something that's imbalanced, then trying to fight. Because a lot of times with these balance pieces, we're fighting to just stay in one spot. Our eyes get fixated. You stand on one of those balance things, I mean, you might perfect being there, but is your breath free? Is your diaphragm clenching? When you stand on that thing, can you look left and right? Usually, the moment someone starts to orient, they'll fall, because again, that pattern is about force and will as opposed to the skill of the movement. So I'm more of a big proponent with balance on using the body and using movement and getting to the floor and back up again in all sorts of different positions. Okay. I'm going to keep going into some of these topics here. And I want to just talk about the different types of muscle that we have in like our muscle fibers. And I also want to read something. So I'm going to read something first, and then we'll get into some questions that you might have. So this again is from my dissertation, and it's only 1 page, and it's kind of the conclusion to the methodologies. But this is my case in point for talking about why it's so important to keep our muscle mass. And I'm not going to read all the references, because in scientific writing, you have like a reference every sentence, and that would just be cumbersome. So here's what my final statement is. So exercise and physical activity have been considered a possible biomarker of aging, in that a lack of them and subsequent declines in aerobic capacity and other physiological processes may lead to a vicious cycle of less activity and further functional decline. Now, the other thing, I'm going to speak to this piece. Improving our fitness, improving our capacity muscularly, aerobically, respiratory, it's not just improving the lung and the heart and the muscle, it's improving all the other pieces. So the more we can perfuse our blood vessels and capillaries with fresh blood and oxygen on a daily basis, it washes out toxins and waste products, right? So it's this idea of, think about a swamp that has had no fresh water go through it. It's just kind of this stagnant mud, right? There's life in it, but it's kind of like it's junky. Opposed to a really clean river stream that's got lots of movement, lots of bubbles, oxygen's coming into the water. It's got that alive algae green kind of quality. That's what we want in our blood vessels. That's what we want in our organs. So when we are increasing our activity, when they say here physiological processes, there is this macro improvement to all function in the system, fluids, organs, hormonal, blood glucose, right? All these things are very, very important. Our brain. Okay, physical activity. Physical activity has been suggested to be a prime anabolic stimulus for skeletal muscle and the prevention of sarcopenia. So again, anabolic means building up. That's why we call them anabolic steroids. That's kind of what Arnold Schwarzenegger got in trouble with, but this ability to like build up muscle, we can do that naturally through exercise, through eating well, recovering. So there's this anabolic building versus catabolic, which is breaking down. So the age-associated decline, here's where it gets interesting. The age-associated decline of physical activity levels is partially responsible for the loss of physiological capacity with age, along with accompanied reductions in muscle mass, strength, and aerobic capacity. It may be that age-associated decline in aerobic capacity is not restricted to aging, but to habitual inactivity or disuse. So again, there's this, don't believe the messengers, everyone. This thought that as we get older, we decline. Our decline is very much related to what we do or don't do with our bodies. There is this thing that, as you get older, you have to take it easier. You shouldn't be lifting weights. You shouldn't be running on the tennis court. Let's help carry groceries for the elderly, for the old people. Again, if someone has a disability and really can't, that's a different situation. But the more we can stay active into our years, if we want to call it aging years or not, we will have an increase or a leveling out of this activity. This function is just part of, we've been duped in a way to think we have to do the gentle aerobic class as we get older, but the high intensity one, that's for, the young people. I also understand orthopedic injuries play a part into this. Hence why machines where we're pushing and we're more structured and not risking imbalances are, I think, a really good thing to use. Okay, I'm going to get back to this. However, with higher levels of physical activity declining in however, even with higher levels, so listen to this one, even with higher levels of physical activity declines in aerobic capacity persists. So in other words, even when there is activity that goes up, and again, remember I defined physical activity, that's just moving about your house, going for a walk, walking to the grocery store, etc., etc. So even with higher levels of that, there's a decline in aerobic capacity. And aerobic capacity is the ability for our heart and our lungs to take in oxygen, to metabolize it, and to get waste products out. When you're out of breath and you feel like you're going to pass out when you're exercising and maybe you haven't exercised for a while, that's our aerobic capacity has declined. Now as we do more, that starts to build up. Okay, Flegg et al., so researcher, found longitudinal declines of peak aerobic activity in healthy older adults still occurred regardless of higher levels of physical activity over a 20-year period. So this is a long 20-year study. Master athletes who maintained vigorous levels of aerobic activity into older ages still experience the age-related declines in aerobic capacity. What? So it's 35% of the decline in aerobic capacity as 35% of the decline in aerobic capacity of trained and sedentary men is due to age-related decreases in muscle mass. It could be that the involuntary loss of muscle mass with aging, also known as sarcopenia, is the culprit for these inevitable declines in VO2 max, which is our aerobic capacity. So what's this saying is that even with people who are really active, who are, playing tennis, who are cycling, who are running, and yes, most of these studies were done in men, but women, we have the same thing, right? Hormones are a little different, but we still are very much similar in our building capacities. It's showing that even though we are vigorous into older age, our muscle mass is declining. So the next part here, this is why I'm really pushing this keeping of our muscle mass through some form of strength training. So given that skeletal muscle is the primary oxygen consuming organ during maximal exercise, so when we exercise, this is our skeletal muscle here. Maybe feel it and say hello, skeletal muscle, like biceps, triceps, or quadriceps, our hamstrings, our calves, our bum muscles, our back muscles. That's skeletal muscle. So this muscle consumes oxygen. It also stores glycogen, which is sugar. It's glucose. So there's a connection too with declining muscle mass and risks of diabetes, right? Because we can't store excess sugar that comes into our blood. That's another story though. So given that skeletal muscle is the primary oxygen consuming organ during maximal exercise, and given that skeletal muscle mass decreases with age along with maximal aerobic capacity, this could suggest improving muscle mass as a prime target to ameliorate such declines. Other factors such as basal oxygen consumption and glucose tolerance, so that's just a fancy way of saying, as you're sitting here listening to me as I'm teaching you, we have an oxygen consumption rate. The healthier we are, the better we can take in oxygen, and it perfuses our brain, our muscles, our organs. When our oxygen consumption, even at rest, is down, that leads to ill health. This is why individuals who have respiratory problems, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, they're not so healthy because their oxygen exchange is very, very low, and there's a buildup of waste product in the system, and then that becomes toxic to the organs, capillaries, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a fancy way, that the fancy basal oxygen consumption, that's what that means. And glucose tolerance. So again, if we like our sugar, and I'm not against sugar by any means, but the high levels of sugar consumption, especially in North America, Australia, the UK, etc., we need to have muscle to eat up that sugar and turn it into glycogen. If we don't have high levels of muscle mass, the sugar then infiltrates into our blood, and of course with time and of course predispositions to things like insulin intolerance and diabetes, we are more likely to maybe go down that path, and then of course this contributes to heart disease, etc., etc. So back to here. Therefore, methods to improve muscle mass and associated strength are important from a physical, functional, and metabolic perspective in older adults. If I was to rewrite that, I would just say in all humans. We need to have this, not just when we're old, throughout life. And if we look at our kiddos right now, I mean, the rates of obesity in little ones is so big, and their fitness levels are so low. And a lot of these kids, I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but from what I'm hearing, a lot of children are ending up with type 2 diabetes younger. Their bodies are just not working properly because of this lack of activity, muscular vigor, strength, mass, etc. So, final paragraph, and then I'll get to some questions. This complex interdependence among factors such as physical activity levels, sarcopenia, again, that's the loss of muscle mass, functional ability, so that's that being able to walk quickly, sit to stand, balance, and aerobic capacity support the importance of moderate to high levels of physical activity for avoidance of age-associated morbidities, that's things like heart disease, diabetes, etc., and improved quality of life. This demonstrates the multidimensional nature of choosing the most appropriate interventions for the aging older adult. So that was a big mouthful of jargony science writing talk. But the main premise of that is the importance of keeping up our muscle mass and muscle strength. And here's the thing, when I was researching this back in 2000 and in my early years in undergrad, there are these recommendations that the government, that the health centers give for good physical activity. And they'll say things like, on most days, if not 4 days a week, walk briskly for 30 minutes and get the heart rate up. I haven't revisited these lately, but very rarely would they say, take grandma or take 50-year-old Susan to the gym and get her to pump at 80%, 8 reps until she's huffing and puffing, right? There's this fear that we're fragile and not able to push when we haven't been doing it. And let me say, based on the research I've seen, that when it's done smart, when it's done with good intention, when it's done learning about what's happening, kind of like when I teach people about how to work with their nervous systems, I don't just say, okay, we're going to orient today. I give context, right? There has to be context so they know what's happening. When all these factors are on board, and a person is really interested, a lot can change, a lot can happen. The final thing I wanted to say that's more sciencey, I'm just looking at my notes here, is the other reason why it's important, I believe, to work on strength, to go for those long leisurely walks, to get down onto the floor, to every now and again do something that requires a bit more power. Our muscle, so again, our skeletal muscle, these big muscles, there are different types of muscle fibers. Some are called slow twitch, some are called fast twitch. And then fast twitch muscle has two different A and B. Not important, but the thing is that humans are built with, again, these different gearboxes. I used the example of a car a little while ago. So, if you drive a stick, when you're going slow, you're kind of going, you might be in third gear, you might go to fourth gear, but then you might be able to go to fifth. Some cars have sixth, some go until obviously first, but then you slow down. So we have in our bodies these different gears. We have different muscle fibers that need to be challenged with long, slow activity where there's a lot of oxygen. This is called aerobic metabolic processing. We go for that long, leisurely walk. We're teaching our body how to take in a lot of oxygen, obviously expel the CO2, but it also is what we would call fat burning, right? So when we're in low intensity exercise, we're burning more of our fat, which is important. We also have muscles that are important for fast, for that sprint we might need to do, the quick hop that we might need to do to avoid something coming at us, or the quick sprint across the street to get across the street until so the light doesn't turn when the light turns red. All these things, those require different energy systems. Those require different muscles. It's still the same muscle, but within each muscle there are these different fibers. And if we are able to train ourselves at all these different levels, we are improving the entire vessel. Of course, in addition to doing our nervous system work. So I wanted to just mention the different types of muscles because, again, unless we studied this, and it's not something that's typically studied or taught, we just are told, you got to do this in PE, you've got to test your strength, you've got to go for the 10-minute run, you got to show your flexibility, you got to show this, but we're not told why, right? It becomes this testing, this is what you have to do, and we're going to take marks and you're going to get graded on how well or not well you did, and it's ridiculous. And then, of course, if we don't do well, it puts a child into this situation who then becomes an adult that feels terrible about their fitness levels, as opposed to really explaining, this is why we're testing your strength. I can pretty much guarantee that the teachers and the PE teachers who were doing this were just following some protocol and doing it because that's what they were told they had to do. I hope that some of this information, it's been quick what I've gone through, but I hope some of this has given you an understanding about why I'm so passionate, not only about healing the nervous system and working with the traumatic stress responses and building capacity. We need to do that. Some of us are going to need to do that more at the beginning so that we can get to this point of doing higher intensity levels of exercise. And if I was to say anything, it would be make that your goal. I think it's great to heal our trauma and release our traumas and build capacity. But what if it was like the end goal is to be able to be vigorous with our bodies, to be able to go to the floor and back up again, to be able to have strength and build our muscle mass, build our flexibilities and our tissue quality, and be able to have this aerobic capacity. The more we're able to bring in oxygen, flush our system, keep healthy in all of these aspects, the better our life will be. And at the end of the day, for me, I just hope when my time comes on this planet, at least, and on this physical body, I just fall asleep one day and I just die, not because of sickness or illness or loss of function, but just because this physical vessel has done enough, but the health has maintained until that end. And we can't maintain that health if we don't work on our physical systems. So I'm going to go into the questions here. If there are any, let me know. And one of the things people might be wondering is, so how do I start? And so it depends on where you're at. Again, if you are brand new here and you know that you have got a lot of old traumas and survival stressors, and let's just say there is a situation of chronic fatigue or autoimmune or high levels of anxiety or depression, gut problems, again, there's so many possibilities when we have unhealed toxic stress in our body, survival stress. It's important for me that you start there, learning how to listen. Because a lot of people go into these vigorous exercise routines without first listening and knowing how to listen and knowing how to follow their impulse. This is when injuries occur. Injuries occur usually because there is a lapse in attention and something gets missed and someone pushes and they're thinking about something else and then something snaps. And we don't want that, right? We want to be able to go into these activities with really strong awareness. So the first thing might be that you start with learning how to regulate your nervous system. I teach that through my programs. Of course, there are other practitioners that also teach this work. I've got some resources that you can check out. One is called the 21-Day Nervous System Tune-Up. That's a self-study course. I've also got a video that is titled How to Find a Good Somatic Practitioner if you know you want to find someone one-on-one. That goes through what to look for. So let's just say that's in place and now you're like, wow, I got to build up my muscle. I got to be independent. I have to have a high walking speed and good oxygen consumption and good metabolism with my glucose, and you want that. Then I would say you got to look at where you are, because everyone's going to be different. You might live in a rural community where there is no gym, or maybe you are in a city and there's all these different community centers. This is where phone calling, I know right now it's kind of weird because everything's been shut down, but things are starting to open up, right? You can order those TheraBands, from the internet. You can go to a fitness store. I do recommend hiring someone or watching some really good videos online that teach you how to do some of these things, but I'm one for always saying if you can work with a person, that's a good way to do it. There are so many people online that teach fitness. It's been happening for a long time, but there's something about going into a gym, working with someone, being in a machine, and actually feeling that rigor. Okay. Terry asks, what about swimming? I started doing laps as a new way to get low impact aerobic activity. Yeah, swimming is a wonderful exercise. It's low impact again. So if someone has a lot of osteoarthritis, pain in joints, I struggle with this as well. Swimming is great. And you're not getting the gravity with swimming. So again, you can use the paddles and kick and do things to increase the heart, and that's great. But there's a reason when you look at swimmers, typically they're a lot leaner, right? They're not as bulky. Some of the men are a bit more bulky, but usually there's a leanness to them. And again, they're very healthy in their muscle mass, but is it also possible to get some oomph through the bone, through the tendons, through the joints? So again, it's a great activity. I love swimming. And how can you find a way to get a little more intensity through the muscle fibers and through the bones and through the tendons. Hey Shira, any advice on handling exercise fatigue? Still recovering from adrenal issues, and I often find I feel worse after exercise, feeling stuck as to how to push without pushing past my limit. So this kind of goes back to what I just said, Shira, in that everyone's going to be different. So if your system is still recovering from a lifetime of pushing and going and you've burnt out, we have to take time to build back up the adrenal capacity, right? And so I have some older vlogs, and one in particular I'm thinking is a webinar I did, and there's also an article on adrenal fatigue. Be sure to check that out if you're new here. But when we have essentially drained our adrenals of juice and goodness, they are literally shriveled up and kind of dead. Like they're still there, but it's like they've been so abused that when we try to increase our activity level to do something healthy like exercise, there's just not enough juice to get ourselves going. And we can push to try to do something, but then we crash because there's just like not enough there. And so this is where it might take some time for you to keep building up the foundations, layering capacity. Again, when I talk about capacity, I mean nervous system capacity and health. Building that up so that those adrenal glands and of course all of the systems around it have that robustness again so that you can deplete the system. Because here's the thing, exercise, aerobic, structured physical exercise is actually breaking down the body. When you push weight, heavy weight, you are tearing the muscle tissue. It might sound crazy, but that's how it builds back up. So we are essentially breaking tissue down so that it can build back up stronger. That is kind of one of the premises for muscle training and weight training. Aerobic activity, it's a little different because we're not wearing down the lungs or the heart. We're exercising them. We're giving them more opportunities to be stressed in a positive way. So it's very important to pace yourself, know where you're at, be titrated in your healing of this burnout, and then add in little doses. And here's the other thing, if somebody has been used to being really, really active in their younger years, or even when they were younger as an adult, and they have a routine, like when I go to the gym, I do this, and I do this, and I do this. And if I don't do that, then there's no point. We have to get out of that mentality, because if we're healing ourselves and recovering from burnout, we may go to the gym and we maybe only do 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or we do 5 minutes and then we spend the rest of the time just floating in the pool and letting, the energy come back. But titration, we're improving and increasing that, so eventually we can get back to our old routines, but we can't just go kind of balls to the wall at the beginning. We have to be very smart and listen to our impulses. Hey Nora, no, this isn't the place to share that, so thank you for asking, but not the place for that. Oh, thanks Crystal for responding. Alexander says, I always get rushes when I work out, also when I'm in stress, even when I write this comment. Is this enough? Is it enough to do Feldenkrais and feel this feeling? So my sense, Alexander, is you mean rush, meaning an activation. So that is a survival response, a flush of activation, that sympathetic, adrenal, cortisol, fight, flight energy. So when that comes in so easily, like when you write this comment, that's a sign that the system has got dysregulation running the front of the show, running the front of the bus, I should say. And so Feldenkrais is really, for me, a higher level form of mind-body work. It's one of the things I'm trained in. And it is not suited, from my opinion, and the way it usually is taught, to help bring regulation back on board. And so, yes, we want to feel the sensation. We want to feel what's there. We want to stay connected to the environment. But I would recommend, if you can, starting working at this level, again, whether it's through one of my programs like the 21 Days, 21-Day Nervous System Tune-Up, or working with a somatic practitioner that works specifically at this trauma dysregulation level. because this is a sign that there is a dysregulation in the system, and we want to work at the base level of what's called neuromodulation first. If you haven't checked out the 5 stages of neuroplastic healing, it's an ebook I have. Be sure to check that out because that outlines the importance of sequencing our neuroplastic healing. Hey, hey, Rachel, great. You got some gym shoes. Awesome. Okay. I think, here we go. Oh, hey, Cher. Oh, great. You already did the 21-day nervous system tune-up and you're hoping to do SBSM next year. Perfect. Keep at it. Yes, frustration is a normal thing. I get frustrated too about some things. So, you know, we have to remember that getting frustrated, feeling a little kind of defeated, that's just kind of part of the human system right now. You know, we've had so much survival, so much trauma. We're really being asked right now to step up and work with ourselves and heal at an individual level. So just keep going. Just know that not every day is going to be 100%, and that's just the way it is. And keep inching forward, keep doing it. Repeat the 21 days, right? You've got the ability to repeat it. Keep going back, because each time we repeat these lessons, we learn more, we build capacity. Hey Marie, I used to go to the gym about 15 years ago, and it used to make me so rageful. David mentioned that earlier. Working with weights was okay, but cardio especially would make me so mad. I'd come out ready to punch anyone who looked at me wrong. I'd like to go back, but I'd like to avoid this rage, or alternatively channel it in a useful way. Any advice? I'm 56 and fat, and I really need to do more than just walk. Yeah, so if you've been listening to the whole show today, if you haven't, go back to the beginning when we finish, but we need to do more than just walk. We need to get more activity, and I can't, of course, consult exactly, but based on what you've said, Marie, and the expression of rage when you do cardio, my hunch is that there is some unresolved trauma and survival stress in your system, as many of us have, when we haven't yet done this work diligently and consistently. So my recommendation is to start looking at the nervous system healing work that I've put together. Again, I've mentioned the program that you could start right now, which is the 21 days, dubbed the 21 days, but it's the 21-day nervous system tune-up, because chances are there's something under there that really needs to come up and out, and the capacity needs to be there to feel where this is stuck in the system, in the memory, in the tissues, in the organs. If you can start to work with that and help that part of you, my sense is you'll be able to get back into the aerobic capacity abilities and exert, but the other stuff will have been diffused and integrated and healed, so you won't have that kind of response. At the beginning, I mentioned a video I did about 2 weeks ago about how excitement can turn into fear. Watch that, because that will maybe explain a few of these things that you are experiencing. So yeah, stick around, and everything you wrote makes complete sense. Hey, Michelle. So you're finishing up week 8 of SBSM. Again, for those of you new here, that's Smart Body, Smart Mind. It's a 12-week program I run once a year. We're going to do it again in March of 2021. So you're at week 8, and I've been seeing amazing shifts, but have a strong resistance to exercise for most of my life. I feel like this comes from a freeze energy versus getting panicked with exercise. I've been shutting down before getting anxious. I've had many small and large shifts in SBSM, and I felt much better, but I did have a huge energy, physical experience of intense heat, flush, headache, and build up to the point of actually vomiting. If it dissipated as soon as I vomited, now I'm feeling very leery of triggering that again with exercise. I'm hopeful that was a big release. So, Michelle, you know, it comes back down to what I just mentioned a second ago about continuing to move forward, and how can we see this capacity building as just ongoing, right? And so, yeah, we're gonna have instances and times where we are put back into a memory, maybe a memory that we remember, or maybe it's a somatic memory, and we might have this vomiting. That's an example of disgust coming out of the body. That's a really important cleanse and purge when you have that awareness. You said that typically you shut down and there's a resistance to exercise. Remember from what you've learned, before the shutdown, there's an activation. So somewhere in your system is probably a fight-flight response that is still being undetected, that is causing that resistance, that shutdown. So my sense is there's something in there to still find and play with, but like I've been saying, titrate. So again, we see this thing as exercises. We have to go all in. We have to look like the Olympic athletes and run and run and run until we're red in the face and sweating like, crazy. It doesn't have to be that way at the beginning. It might be something as simple as doing a few jogging in the spot in your home, right? Or doing some jumping jacks, or doing something that's a little more vigorous, going up and down the stairs a few times, and then stopping and feeling the shift in physiology and being with it and really breathing and sensing. So again, you say you're leery of triggering, so just see how can there be a curiosity with the next time you go into that. Hey Shane, or Shanine, you said, I used to be trained as a dancer and I've been battling with health setbacks for years, so being gentle and activating my body is important. Yes, definitely. It really is shocking to me how many ex-athletes I've worked with, I'm being one of them, who have no clue how much they repressed inside with their sport. I had about 2-3 months over the course of late last year and early this year where all of my old concussion and whiplash injuries started to come up and release, and it wasn't fun, but it was important, and it has offered me more capacity in my body. But again, even with regulation on board, and this is very important for all of you, students and non-students, just a reminder that this healing work, it doesn't end. There isn't an expiry date. It's not like taking a course of antibiotics. You take it and then it's done. Our system is infinite. Our capacity to grow and evolve is infinite. And we also have a lot of held trauma in our bodies, not just from this lifetime, but our generations before us. We're learning about this right now in many ways. And so it's important to really, really tune in to how essential this is seen as a lifestyle, a lifelong process. Okay. Great. Hey Elizabeth, yeah, Elia is doing a 6-week dance class program starting up soon. Crystal, if you want, you can pop that up there. Elia Emrak, as I co-teach with him, we do our up-down workshops together. And he is part of my faculty and on SBSM, and we co-teach up and down together. So he is doing an intensive movement program starting very soon. I think it's like 4 classes a week for 6 weeks, and I think 2 private sessions. It's a steal. So if you've got time and you want to do some Qigong and Tai Chi, and I think he's going to do some of the up-down work, I would definitely check that out. All right. We have covered a lot. Let me just see from my notes here if there's anything else that I've missed. Of course, there's always more, but just to give you a quick review, right? So wanted to share this with you because my first sort of 10, 12, 15 years of education and training was in exercise, fitness, rehab. I worked in a gym. I taught training and cardio training and circuit training, and it's still something that I do weekly, daily, if not, in my own personal life. And I've really missed the gym the last few months because everything's been shut. So I'm looking into getting back into that myself. But I wanted to share this beginning part because I'm often saying exercise is so important. It's so important. You got to exercise, got to keep your muscle strength up. But I wanted to say why, right? It's not just to look good and to be trim and fit. It's to be fit, but it's this muscle mass. We really need to keep our muscle mass. If we have it, we want to maintain it. If we've lost it, we want to build it back up. And the beauty of the human system is that it can build back up again. Our capacity to recover and regenerate is massive, so do not buy into that thing that, oh, I'm old, so I'm just going to decline and lose my function and not be able to keep doing these things. Of course, if certain injuries are limiting you, there might be some options that you got to figure out, but there are ways with the way we've created gyms and recreation centers and community centers and online trainers and all of that to find a way to get this rigor, this vigor back into the system. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, wouldn't it just be great if we could keep our health into our older years or bring back health that maybe we never had? It's possible. It's totally possible, but we have to actively do it. It's not something that we can just do for a week and then forget about it. We got to keep at it consistently. And I do not do personal sessions anymore, Shane. So at this point, at least, I'm not doing private sessions. All my teaching is online through my programs, either the 21-day nervous system tune-up, that's kind of like a self-study starter course. Smart Body, Smart Mind, SBSM starts up again in March. And then, as I mentioned, I usually am teaching at this time of year in person, my up and down workshops with Elia. We just put his link up there. But because of COVID and the inability to come into groups and all the crazy travel restrictions, we thought it was better to just cancel everything and wait and see what happens at the end of the year. So if you'd like to come and work with me, the best way is through those programs or when Up Down starts up again to do it that way. I do have a drop-in class this Saturday. I do once a month a virtual class, an hour long. It's $19. This Saturday, it's at 12 p.m. We're going to be working with this concept of activating our healing DNA. So I'll say a quick bit about that. Basically, we are seeing that a big portion of our DNA is not coded. It's called junk DNA. You can even look it up. And a lot of our struggles, a lot of the fact that we tend to stay in survival, and it's so hard for us to get out of these programmed, wired patterns that we were born into, that we perpetuate. It's because of these dormant parts of our DNA. It's these parts of us that we just don't activate, kind of like the muscle, right? Like it's sitting there and it wants to be worked. So we're going to work with a more gentle version of activating the system. It's going to be basics of nervous system health. We're going to orient, we're going to follow impulse, we're going to connect to the breath, but we're also going to do a lot of fun intention and visualization about getting our DNA active and healing again, as opposed to being stuck dormant in junkie mode and in survival mode. So thank you everyone for being here. If you're on YouTube watching this, thanks for coming and listening after the fact. If you've come onto Facebook Live now or after the fact, thank you again. Again, if you haven't visited my site and checked out the resources I have, we've got YouTube channels and blogs and courses and ebooks and old webinars and video trainings. There's a lot to keep you busy for a very long time there. So thank you. Thanks to Crystal, who's been popping up links as I go. And we'll do another one of these in a month. And I'm going to be doing a Q&A session in a few weeks within my Healthy Nervous System Facebook group. If you don't know that group, we're giving it a bit of a facelift right now, but it's called Healthy Nervous System Revolution. It's a Facebook group. It's a private group. You have to answer some questions before you are let into that group, just so that we know you're real. And I'm going to be doing my Q&As in there as time goes forward, and I'll be doing these special topics here on this Facebook page as time moves forward, at least for now. So we'll talk to you soon. We'll see you maybe on drop-in class this Saturday. Be well, everyone. Take care, and just imagine that muscle mass in your body getting strong and giving you lots of good health, because that's what it wants to do. All right, bye.